Corporate chess tolerates no sentimentalism. In late 2017, global markets witnessed a move that seemed straight out of a sci-fi dystopia. The Walt Disney Company, once a factory of fairy tales and innocent nostalgia, moved its queen across the board and swallowed the lion's share of the 21st Century Fox empire for a staggering $71 billion. If we add to that the surgical acquisition of Marvel in 2009 for $4 billion, the board was clearly set, an aggregate $100 billion play destined to monopolize global pop culture. The world applauded the birth of an insurmountable titan, but the masters of strategy knew that on the geopolitical board of entertainment, the bigger the king, the more devastating the price to keep it standing. To understand the magnitude of this checkmate, we must look back to the turn of the century, when Disney faced a quiet identity crisis. Its animation classics were losing momentum. Pixar dominated digital storytelling, and young audiences sought darker, more complex mythologies. That was when Bob Iger, ascending to the throne of leadership, realized he had to sacrifice the brand's purism to save the kingdom. The purchase of Marvel wasn't just a commercial transaction, it was the first move of an aggressive opening, a capture of mental territory where modern superheroes would replace traditional princes and box office revenue would become the ultimate metric of power and cultural dominance. But the appetite of an empire is never satisfied with a single piece. As the board advanced into the streaming era, the threat of new players like Netflix transformed a solid defense into a desperate offensive. The merger with Fox wasn't just about acquiring studios or film archives. It was a brutal trench war for the control of data, human attention, and international distribution rights. Disney believed it was consolidating its dynasty for the next 100 years, completely unaware that by absorbing such a vast and fragmented ecosystem, it was fracturing the very financial backbone that sustained it, planting the seeds of a perfect psychological trap. There is a phenomenon in business psychology known as winner's hubris, where repeated success blinds decision-makers to the risks of tomorrow. With Marvel generating billions every quarter and Fox's catalog now under its exclusive control, Disney's leadership entered a state of triumphalist trance. The plan seemed flawless. Feed the Disney Plus machine with a continuous avalanche of content, forcing the market to capitulate before its monumental scale. Yet, behind the scenes, a much tenser reality unfolded, where short-term spreadsheets tried to predict volatile human behavior, ignoring that audiences grow weary very quickly when art is replaced by an industrial assembly line. The capture of Fox, in particular, was a move fraught with invisible friction. Drastically opposed corporate cultures collided in the corridors of Hollywood. Disney's highly polished, controlling, and family-oriented machine versus Fox's bolder, more cynical, and auteur-driven spirit. Legacy executives were wiped off the board, ambitious projects were shelved, and the synergy machine began to choke under its own weight. The strategic error was psychological, arrogantly assuming that intellectual property alone would guarantee consumer loyalty, without understanding that by diluting scarcity and the quality of its franchises, Disney was actively devaluing its most precious asset, the perception of prestige. While Wall Street applauded the gigantism, the debt accumulated to finance this imperialist expansion surpassed $40 billion. The board now demanded a constant, absolute cash flow just to cover the interest of Iger's audacity. Disney was no longer just competing for weekend box office numbers. It had transformed into an entertainment utility, trapped in a digital streaming arms race where each new subscriber cost more than the profit they generated. The trap was set. To keep the stock price at the top, the empire was forced to sacrifice creative innovation in favor of exhaustive repetition, initiating the quiet decline of its golden age. The market is a cruel god that punishes arrogance with the same speed it rewards audacity. Around 2023, the first signs of systemic fatigue became public. Once guaranteed Marvel box office hits began to fail, Disney Plus growth stagnated, and production costs spiraled out of control. reaching an absurd $300 million per film. The check to the king did not come from a direct competitor, but from a collective psychological saturation. The public, bombarded by dozens of spin-off series and soulless narratives, simply decided to turn off the screen, leaving the $100 billion empire exposed and bleeding financially in the public square. Behind closed doors, panic replaced arrogance. Rumors of internal power struggles echoed through the business portals of New York. Bob Iger's emergency return from retirement to save his own legacy was the ultimate signal to investors that the strategy had failed. The pieces of the board began to fall. Mass layoffs of thousands of employees, cancellations of multi-million-dollar projects, and crushing pressure from activist investors demanding the breakup of the company. The acquisition of Fox, which was meant to be the crown jewel, revealed itself to be a financial Trojan horse, dragging the company's profit margins down into the abyss of operational mediocrity. The crisis became geopolitical and cultural as the brand found itself caught in the crossfire of American culture wars, alienating significant portions of its traditional consumer base. When the company's market value plummeted by billions in just a few months, it became clear that Disney had made the classic mistake of declining empires, overestimating its ability to dictate the rules of the world. The strategy of buying out rivals eliminated the healthy competition that historically forced it to be creative, transforming Hollywood's largest studio into a heavy, slow bureaucracy, fundamentally incapable of reacting with agility to the rapid changes in digital consumer behavior. In the end, the ultimate lesson of Disney's $100 billion decision is that on the board of modern capitalism, massive scale does not equal immortality. The aggressive acquisition strategy successfully bought the past and present of pop culture, but it utterly failed to secure a monopoly on the future. The empire remains standing, but its crown is visibly tarnished, serving as a stark monument to the danger of confusing financial dominance with artistic relevance and real human connection. Every great chess move requires a sacrifice, but Disney's tragic mistake was sacrificing its very creative soul on the altar of infinite growth. Corporate psychology shows us that when an organization focuses more on controlling the market than on enchanting the customer, it forges the tools of its own obsolescence. The board keeps moving, new technologies emerge, and the real question that remains is whether the king will manage to reinvent himself before the next checkmate becomes inevitable. This story teaches us that, whether managing an entertainment empire or the decisions of your own life, overconfidence in the structure can collapse if the foundation isn't authentic. The obsession with absolute control often blinds us to the invisible variables of chaos and change. In the chess of business, just as in life, the most enduring victory belongs not to the one who consumes the most pieces, but to the one who knows how to adapt with agility to an ever-transforming board. If you want to keep decoding the minds behind the greatest economic and geopolitical moves of our time, free from mainstream media cliches, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. Leave your comment below. Did Disney make the biggest mistake in its history? Or is this just the bitter price to reign alone? The board is wide open, and the next move is yours.